Teenagers are quite known for making life-changing decisions without thinking them through, and these teens took it far enough that they were tagged dangerous. These young individuals shocked the world with their audacious crimes, leaving us all wondering how such darkness could exist within them. From their shocking acts to their emotional reactions in court, we'll take you on a journey through their disturbing paths. So join us and prepare to be amazed and disturbed as we explore the lives of these dangerous teenagers reacting to life behind bars. Let's dive in. Number 15. George Stinney. George Stinney was just 14 years old, an African-American boy from Pinewood, South Carolina. In 1944, he was accused of murdering two white girls, Betty June Binnicker and Mary Emma Thames, in Alcaloo, South Carolina. Their bodies were found in a ditch near their home. George had seen the girls the day before, which made him a suspect. He was arrested and interrogated without a lawyer or his parents present. His trial was shockingly brief, lasting only 3 hours, and the all-white jury took just 10 minutes to decide his fate. The electric chair. But here's the heartbreaking part. George was so small that he didn't fit into the electric chair properly. They had to stack books under him, and even then, the electric shock helmet kept slipping off, revealing the terrified face of a little child. In 2014, a circuit court judge finally acknowledged that George hadn't received a fair trial and that his rights under the Sixth Amendment were violated. His conviction was vacated, but the case remains contentious as new evidence suggests someone else might have been responsible for the girls' murders. George Stinney's story highlights racial injustice and the flaws in our justice system. He was a young boy who didn't get the protection and fairness he deserved. It's a tragic reminder of the need for justice to be blind to race and treat everyone fairly. Number 14. Lionel Tate. Lionel Alexander. Tate holds a troubling record as the youngest American ever sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The incident occurred in 2001 when Tate was 14 years old, and he was found guilty of first-degree murder for the brutal death of 6-year-old Tiffany Unick in Broward County, Florida. At the time of the incident, Tate's mother was babysitting Tiffany, and she left them alone for a while. Tate's defense argued that he was playing with Tiffany and unintentionally caused her death while demonstrating professional wrestling moves he had seen on TV. Tate was a large 12-year-old boy, weighing 1,066 pounds, while Tiffany weighed only 46 pounds. The injuries sustained by Tiffany were severe, including a lacerated liver, a fractured skull, fractured rib, and a swollen brain. Prosecutors likened her injuries to those from falling off a 3-story building. Despite Tate's young age, he was sentenced to life imprisonment by Judge Joel T. Lazarus of Broward County Circuit Court. The judge expressed that Tate's actions were not typical child's play, they were cold, cruel, and heartless. Tate remained mostly expressionless and silent during sentencing. This sentencing decision sparked controversy due to Tate's age at the time of the crime and the young age of his victim. Many criticized Florida's justice system for how it treated juvenile offenders in such cases. Tate's case shed light on broader issues concerning the handling of young offenders in the criminal justice system. Number 13. Joshua Phillips. At the young age of 14, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips committed a terrible act by taking the life of his 8-year-old neighbor and friend, Maddie Clifton, back in November 1998. Joshua was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole the following year. According to Joshua's statement, the tragedy happened when he and Maddie were playing together outside his home. Accidentally, he hit her eye with a baseball, and she started crying and screaming in pain. Joshua got scared, knowing his abusive father would be angry if he found out. So, in panic, he brought Maddie into his house and struck her with a baseball bat, hiding her body under the base of his bed. Joshua's mother found Maddie's lifeless body in his room, leading to his arrest. The trial was held in Polk County instead of Duval County due to concerns about the publicity in their hometown of Jacksonville. Joshua's lawyer chose not to present any witnesses for the defense and even advised his parents not to testify. Joshua himself remained silent throughout the 2-day trial, and the jury took only 2 hours to convict him. As he was under the age of 16, Joshua was not eligible for the death penalty, and he received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 12. Antonio Barbeau. When Antonio Barbeau was only 14 years old, he committed a horrifying crime by attacking and killing his own grandmother with the help of his friend, Nathan Papp, at her home in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. The elderly woman, Barbara Olson, had welcomed them into her home, unaware of their sinister intentions. As she turned away to call Antonio's mother, he struck her on the head with a hatchet. Feeling sickened by his actions, Antonio went to the bathroom. When he returned, he witnessed his friend, Pap, using a hammer to further harm the helpless woman. Both boys were found guilty of taking Barbara Olson's life. In 2013, Antonio Barbeau was sentenced to spend at least 36 years in jail and won't be eligible for parole until he is 50 years old. During his court appearance, he tried to read an apologetic statement, but his tears made it difficult for him to speak. His attorney had to finish reading the statement, as he too fought back tears. The court acknowledged that Antonio had suffered a brain injury in a previous incident, resulting in an unspecified cognitive disorder, which may have influenced his actions. However, it was clear that the severity of the crime could not be excused solely due to mental issues. According to Pap, the robbery and assault were Antonio's ideas. After realizing Olson had died, the boys panicked and tried to move her to their car, leaving a trail of blood through the house. However, they were unsuccessful and ended up leaving her in the garage. They also stole several items, including a purse, loose change, and jewelry, before driving away in Olson's car. Number 11, T.J. Lane. T.J. Lane was a 17-year-old former student at Chardon High School. Tragically, on February 27, he committed a terrible act, taking the lives of 3 Chardon High students and injuring 3 others. Witnesses said that Lane had personal issues with one of the victims, and they used to ride the same school bus together. During the attack, Lane used a .22 caliber handgun, which resulted in 2 wounded students being hospitalized, and sadly, one of them was left permanently paralyzed. Lane faced 6 charges, but because he was 17 years old at the time of the crimes, authorities had to decide whether to treat him as an adult or a juvenile. He showed no remorse for his actions and arrived at the court wearing a blue button-down shirt. However, when he sat down, he unbuttoned it, revealing a white t-shirt with the word "killer" written on it. This only added to the chilling atmosphere in the courtroom. When given the opportunity to speak, Lane made things worse for himself by saying hateful things to the victims' families. He even laughed at one mother while she made her statement, causing more pain to the already grieving families. Eventually, Lane pleaded guilty to all the charges and was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The community was left devastated by the senseless violence that had taken the lives of innocent students and forever changed the lives of others. Number 10. Roxanna Sikorski. On October 2014, a frightening incident unfolded when 15-year-old Roxanna Sikorski was sentenced to 10 years in prison for planning to harm her own family. She had tried to attack one of her siblings while they were sleeping. During the court proceedings, emotions ran high as her parents, who were the intended victims, pleaded for mercy on her behalf. They portrayed Roxanna as a troubled child with a difficult past. She had been adopted from Poland and had experienced trauma before falling under the influence of her manipulative 23-year-old lover. Roxanna was diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, a mental disease in which children are unable to build an emotional connection to their main caregivers as a result of the trauma she experienced as a youngster. The mother, Lauren Sikorski, said, "She's in desperate need of continued psychological help. She is still fragile, and an adult prison would shatter her delicate world. How will sentencing her as an adult help her? Is this justice?" Roxanna's family stood by her side throughout the trial, expressing concerns about her understanding of the confession and the implications of her guilty plea and the plea deal. They worried about her comprehension of the legal process and questioned the intentions of her current lawyer. The family's hired attorney planned to appeal the case, arguing that Roxanna's psychological damage from her time in a Polish orphanage and her troubled biological family, combined with external influence, had contributed to the tragic events. When the sentence was announced, Roxanna broke down in tears and expressed regret for her actions. The defense believed that her troubled past and the negative external influences had played a role in the unfortunate turn of events. Number 9. Stuart Harling. Stuart Harling was a loner who escaped into a dark world of violent computer games and disturbing websites. At just 19 years old, he turned his back on his family and a potential career in accountancy to live out his twisted fantasies. Tragically, his fantasy world became reality when he brutally murdered Cheryl Moss, who was 32 years old. He later confessed to psychiatrists that he had dreamed of becoming a serial killer after watching a documentary about an infamous American murderer named Richard Ramirez, who had taken the lives of 13 victims in Los Angeles. Stuart's obsession with violence led him to research other serial killers like Dennis Nielsen, Colin Ireland, and Daniel Gonzalez. He spent countless hours online, even engaging with dangerous individuals in chat rooms. Psychiatrists who assessed him noted his desire for infamy and media attention, portraying himself as a victim. Dr. Philip Joseph, a leading consultant psychiatrist, expressed deep concern, describing Stuart as one of the most dangerous teenagers in the country. In his younger years, Stuart had been an altar boy and showed academic promise at Campion Grammar School. However, his bizarre sense of humor and difficulties in social interactions were also evident to his teachers. After leaving school, Harling's focus shifted away from his studies, and he became absorbed in his video games, spending whole days playing on his console. He isolated himself from his family and delved into a disturbing world of dark fantasies centered around rape and torture, finding solace in his bedroom. His PlayStation games became his escape, connecting him with animated characters in ways he couldn't achieve with real people. During the 10 months leading up to the tragic event, he assembled a murder kit through online purchases, including a sunglasses, hunting knife, an Adidas jacket, leather gloves, and a witch's wig. Harling acquired his deadly skills from an instructional manual titled Hand-to-Hand Combat, Knife Fighting, and Self-Defense, which was used by the U.S. Marine Corps. In a horrifying twist of fate, he randomly chose his victim, a nurse who was taking her usual cigarette break. Mrs. Moss, who had dedicated over 10 years to her work at the hospital and had been married for just 18 months, was a loving and caring person. On her father's birthday, she was supposed to celebrate with her family, but tragedy struck when Harling unleashed an explosion of violence. He mercilessly stabbed Mrs. Moss 73 times with a razor-sharp hunting knife, causing unimaginable pain and suffering. Some of the wounds were so severe that they split open her skull. She was defenseless, lying on the ground, unable to protect herself. After committing the heinous act, Harling discarded his murder kit in a nearby park, leaving the victim to be discovered by her friends from the hospital and a woman walking her dog. Within an hour, Harling was eagerly checking the internet for news about the murder. However, his carelessness led the police right to his doorstep. They found his address in the bloodied murder kit, and he was soon arrested. In prison before his trial, Harling shockingly revealed to an officer that he killed Mrs. Moss out of sheer boredom. The tragic and senseless act of violence left a community devastated and forever scarred, highlighting the devastating consequences of unchecked fantasies and violent impulses. During his trial, Stuart revealed that he felt no remorse while hurting Miss Moss. To him, she was no different from an animated enemy in one of his video games. Judge Brian Barker handed down a sentence of a minimum of 20 years in prison, acknowledging that Stuart showed no real understanding of the gravity of his actions. Number 8. Philip Chisholm. Back in October 2013, a horrifying incident shook the town of Danvers, Massachusetts. A 14-year-old student named Philip Chisholm, who attended Danvers High School, committed a terrible act that left everyone stunned. His victim was his math teacher, 24-year-old Colleen Ritzer, a beloved teacher known for her kindness and dedication to her students. On that fateful day after school was over, Chisholm followed Miss Ritzer into a bathroom and attacked her in a brutal manner. Unfortunately, she lost her life due to this tragic event. The police arrested Chisholm the next morning, and they found incriminating evidence, her blood on his hands, that left no doubt about his involvement. The judicial process that followed resulted in a life-altering punishment for the young offender. Chisholm, still a teenager at the time of the trial, received a life sentence with the possibility of release after 25 years. The courtroom was filled with emotions, and Chisholm himself seemed shocked and speechless. Throughout the trial, the victim's father, Tom Ritzer, expressed immense sadness and regret for not being able to protect his daughter. He shared how he searched for her at school and even passed by her unknowingly in the woods. The pain of knowing he couldn't undo what had happened was heartbreaking. The incident left the entire community in sorrow and disbelief as they mourned the loss of a beloved teacher and tried to understand how such a terrible event could happen. Number 7. Jacob Morgan. Jacob Morgan, a 17-year-old boy with autism, couldn't hold back his tears as he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for a tragic incident that happened on March 2015. He admitted to starting a fire that took the life of his 14-month-old half-brother, Joshua. Throughout the trial, his family supported him, firmly believing in his innocence. Jacob's mother, Julie Dover, passionately protested his guilt in court, standing by her son to show her unwavering love as a parent. According to Jacob's parents, he was actually trying to enter the burning house to rescue Joshua, but concerned neighbors stopped him, urging him to stay away from the flames. They explained that Jacob has developmental challenges, struggles with reading and writing, and had confessed to starting the fire during a long, unrecorded interview with investigators. During this interview, he gave conflicting stories about how the fire started. At first, he said it was accidental, claiming that he had thrown a pillow near a radiator. Later, he admitted to intentionally burning a cushion and throwing it into the air. Fire investigators found evidence of two fires, one in the living room and another on a blanket in Joshua's bedroom where he was sleeping. Prosecutors argued that Jacob had previously lit another fire on the property just 2 weeks before, revealing his fascination with fire and fondness for tea candles. Despite the family's insistence on Jacob's innocence and his developmental difficulties, the court handed down a 15-year sentence for his involvement in the tragic incident. Number 6. Nicholas Cruz. Nicholas Cruz, the teenager responsible for the tragic Parkland school shooting, where 17 innocent lives were lost, has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Last year, 2022, the jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision on the death penalty, which disappointed and angered the families of the victims. The sentencing was carried out by Broward Circuit Judge Elizabeth Scherer, who mandated that Nicholas serve a life sentence for each of the 17 counts he pleaded guilty to, and these sentences will run consecutively. He also received life imprisonment with a minimum of 20 years for 4 counts and life without parole for the remaining 3 counts. The judge ensured that Cruz wouldn't be able to benefit financially from his crimes and garnished his commissary funds to cover costs and restitution. After the sentencing, Cruz was transferred to the custody of the Florida Department of Corrections. The trial, which lasted for months, came to an end after 2 days of victim impact testimony. Families of the survivors and those who lost their lives in the February 2018 shooting spoke in court. Throughout the testimony, Cruz showed no emotion, dressed in a red prison jumpsuit and eyeglasses. At first, he wore a medical mask, but he was asked to remove it as it seemed disrespectful to hide his expressions while the families addressed him. Now, it's time for the subscriber pick for today's video. We received a photo from one of our viewers featuring the before and after pictures of Jessica Karnline. In the before image, we see Jessica wearing a smile, which is quite surprising given the serious situation she's in. But here comes the twist. In the after image, her expression changes to one of shock. What could have caused this sudden shift in emotions? Some of you speculate that she might have been dealing with a hangover during her initial appearance, which could explain the smile. But when the life sentence was announced, it seems like reality hit her hard, washing away any intoxication, and she became visibly sober. Do you know any teenagers that were given life sentences that we have not mentioned here today? Let us know in the comments below. Number 5. Jessica Karnline. 17-year-old Jessica Karnline was involved in a tragic accident that resulted in the deaths of 2 people. She crashed her car into the Wyoming Medical Center, causing the loss of 2 lives. Jessica pleaded guilty to 2 counts of vehicular homicide. The incident occurred when Jessica was driving eastbound on 2nd Street, heading towards the Wyoming Medical Center. Unfortunately, her vehicle swerved over the curb, hitting a sign and then crashing into the hospital building itself. Brandon Avery and Amanda Strickland, both 27 years old, lost their lives due to the injuries sustained in the collision. Jessica herself was also injured, but survived. Investigators later found a can of air duster in the car. In a police interview, Jessica admitted that it made her feel high. It was also discovered that the car was speeding at the time of the crash, going as fast as 76 miles per hour. Tragically, no one in the car was wearing their seatbelts. At the trial, the judge sentenced Jessica to serve between 12 to 16 years in prison for her actions.
Doubt for a second your remorse and how you feel right now.
During the trial, Jessica showed deep remorse, and emotions were evident as tears rolled down her face while she spoke in court. It was a heart-wrenching situation for everyone involved. Number 4. Jaleel Smith-Riley. In 2003, Jaleel Smith-Riley committed a terrible crime, taking the life of a young woman, Portia Brooks, and seriously injuring her partner, Aaron Martin. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The families involved had mixed feelings about the judgment, feeling that it was both overdue and not enough. During the emotional sentencing session, there were outbursts from both sides, and Smith-Riley even fell down at one point. He tried to withdraw his guilty plea and avoid the death penalty, but the judge judge, Charles Q. Becker, dismissed his request and gave him the maximum punishment. Smith-Riley's family pleaded for leniency, highlighting that he had no criminal history before that tragic night and believing in his potential for rehabilitation. On the other hand, the families of the victims, especially Portia Brooks' mother, asked for the harshest punishment possible. They believed that Smith-Riley had taken away their loved ones, and it was time for their family to find some peace. Despite the difficulties ahead, Portia Brooks' mother expressed her determination to move forward with the support of her family.
But he killed me. Mentally, emotionally, he killed my identity.
And in memory of her daughter. Smith-Riley's lawyer mentioned that he had never seen a client try to withdraw a guilty plea before, but he advised against it, fully understanding the seriousness of the charges. As the courtroom proceedings came to an end, both families were left with mixed emotions. For the victims' families, the punishment was a crucial step toward finding closure and beginning the healing process. Number 3. Damon Kemp. A former student of Bethune-Cookman University named Damon Kemp, now 24 years old and from Stone Mountain, Georgia, was found guilty of committing a terrible crime. He was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder using a firearm and also for breaking into an apartment while armed and attacking the occupants. The incident happened in Daytona Beach in 2018 when Kemp shot and killed 2 young men, Trey Ingram and Jordan Payton, who were both 19 years old. The victims were found dead inside an apartment at Jade Park Apartment Homes. Ingram was shot 4 times and Payton was shot 6 times. Since his arrest in 2018, Kemp has been in jail, and during the trial, he showed no visible reaction when the guilty verdict was announced. The court found him responsible for the tragic deaths of his former classmates, and his actions on that day were proven to be criminal. Number 2. Jennifer Mee. In a dramatic courtroom scene, Jennifer Mee, aka the Hiccup Girl, was found guilty of taking the life of a 22-year-old man. The verdict meant she would spend the rest of her life in prison without any chance of release. When the decision was delivered, Jennifer started crying, and family members from both sides were devastated, leaving the courtroom in tears. According to the prosecutor, Jennifer had planned the crime and convinced others to join in a robbery attempt that tragically ended in murder. She had hoped for a lesser charge, but now faced a life sentence. The victim's mother spoke to the media, expressing her deep grief and emphasizing that nothing could ever bring her son back. She wanted the focus to remain on her son, the victim of this terrible crime. She thanked the state for its support throughout the long and difficult journey to seek justice. Jennifer's mother was visibly upset as she left the courthouse, surrounded by family. She didn't want to speak to reporters, and Jennifer's defense attorney, John Trevina, also chose not to comment on the case. The prospect of spending her entire life in prison weighed heavily on Jennifer. The trial and its conclusion brought closure to some while reopening old wounds for others. It was a turning point in this tragic tale, affecting the lives of everyone involved. Number 1. Dylan Shoemaker. On March 2021, a heartbreaking incident shook the community of Springfield, New York, leaving behind a trail of devastation and sorrow. Dylan Shoemaker, a 16-year-old teenager, was entrusted with the care of 1-year-old Austin Smith, while his girlfriend, Ashley Smith, went to work. However, the evening took a grim turn when Shoemaker called law enforcement, reporting that Austin was unresponsive. The subsequent investigation by Erie County Sheriff Tim Howard exposed a harrowing tale of abuse and violence. On March 19, 2013, as law enforcement arrived on the scene, they immediately noticed significant bruising all over Austin's body, particularly around his face. This discovery raised immediate suspicions, prompting a thorough inquiry into the circumstances surrounding Austin's death. After careful investigation and gathering of evidence, it was revealed that Dylan Shoemaker, the boyfriend of Austin's mother, was responsible for the child's untimely demise. The autopsy determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head, a consequence of repeated strikes inflicted by Shoemaker on the innocent 1-year-old. The gravity of the crime demanded justice, and Shoemaker was charged with second-degree murder. Throughout the trial, shocking revelations emerged, including a video of Shoemaker expressing callous disregard for the consequences of his actions. In the video, he arrogantly stated, "I'm a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry and they're going to feel sorry for me," referring to the jury. However, Shoemaker's theatrical attempt to evoke sympathy during the sentencing hearing fell flat.
I was trying to change my life around. In 2013, I was doing so much better.
Justice M. William Buller remained steadfast in delivering justice and sentenced Shoemaker to 25 years to life in prison for his heinous involvement in Austin Smith's death. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.